The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the first chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
An account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Here we go. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram, and Aram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. Everyone still with me? And after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Salathiel, and Salathiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Elachiam, and Elachiam the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar the father of Mathan, and Mathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah, 14 generations. Now the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but he had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I should have used the Story Bible too. I remember when we first arrived here at St. Paul's in Colcamp. Among other things, I was handed the keys to the parsonage, the keys to the church building, and a church directory. And as you know, as I began to look through the directory, I noticed there wasn't a huge variety of last names. And as I got to talking to many of you, I began realizing how big some of your families and extended families really are. And I know I've joked about this with many of you, but as I continued to get to know you, I began drawing lines in the directory so I could remember all of these connections. And then I started needing more lines as I got to know you more. And then I needed a bigger directory. And then I realized that pretty much everyone here is related in some way or another, unless you're one of the newcomers to the area who's only been here like 30 or 40 years. I love to kid you all about that, mainly because my family is so small compared to many of yours. But still, when I was growing up, we had that infamous wall of family photos. You know what I'm talking about. Ours was on the stairwell as you went up to the second floor. And we had, a handful of photos, of course, but probably most of you would need, like 3 or 4 flights of steps to fit all the photos. And I know this because of the required family invites you have when it comes to planning weddings. Because those lists get long, don't they? But all of these relationships, these lists, these connections, these walls of photos, these histories, they're all very important to us. They tell us about who we are and where we've come from. So as you know, we're going to spend these 4 weeks of Advent on this Christmas tour of homes, looking at visiting the gospel writers. We're asking, what is the message of Christmas? What is the message of the birth or the arrival of Jesus Christ through the eyes of each of the gospel writers? So last week we went to Mark's house, and we found that it was difficult to find because he didn't have any Christmas decorations on it. And he probably is not going to have any decorations on it because, as we heard, his gospel begins with John the Baptist. And then Jesus comes and is baptized and is sent into the wilderness to begin his ministry. That was it. That's all Mark gave us. So today we're going to Matthew's house. And fortunately for us, Matthew's house is not hard to find. His house is covered with Christmas decorations. The problem is you can't see any of the Christmas decorations because his house is also filled to overflowing with family. Family has come from far and wide. Family has come from the past. Family has even come from the dead. Family fills every room of this house, and they have all come to celebrate the birth of a baby, an addition to their family. Everyone is there. Everyone. And you know what happens when everyone is there? You have eccentric Aunt Marie at the buffet table filling her purse with her own version of to-go food. You have crazy Uncle Al who's there, drink in hand, wandering from room to room, looking for the next victim he can corner to talk about politics. Cousin John is there, which surprises everyone because everyone knows his past. But that's what you get with family, right? So this past week, actually, I was able to join Charlotte's preschool class for their annual field trip to a Christmas tree farm. All the kids got together, they got to decorate cookies, they had hot chocolates, they got a story. Then we got to go on a hayride around the farm and look at the trees. And then the kids got to go choose one of the trees that they got to cut down themselves and then wrap up and prepare to go to someone's home. And as we rode around this field filled with evergreens of all different sizes, I was reminded again, which is why I love trees so much, that every single tree is so unique and different. No two are alike. And especially when it comes to Christmas trees, it's extremely rare to find that perfect tree, the one that has no imperfections on any of those sides. They're only really imperfections when we want them as a Christmas tree, So we take them home and we put them up against the wall and we put the bad side against the wall. Or if it's a really bad tree, we put it in a corner like we do with kids. Or we cover those big bare spots if there's a lot of them. We get the big ornaments out and we put them right in the bare spot and we cover it with lights. And because those perfect trees, those perfect, grand, beautiful trees, those are reserved for like Rockefeller Center or Washington, D.C., right? Those other trees, they're suitable for the rest of us. But looking at all those trees, those Christmas trees, reminded me of our family trees. Because every family tree tends to have some of those bare spots or those ugly spots that we like to hide up against the wall or try to cover up as best we can. But today we hear that Jesus' family is no different than ours. Matthew begins his gospel with that long list of Jesus' family tree. He says the account of the genealogy, which literally means Genesis. Does that sound familiar? Meaning the origin or the birth of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. That brief intro is then followed by that long list of descendants of Abraham. The father of, the father of, the father of, or if you're one of those King James fans, begat, begat, begat. You know, this is not a story that ever really shows up in our regular lectionary for obvious reasons. And for some reason, we never seem to include it in the Christmas Eve pageant either. But obviously, it's important for Matthew. So as Charlotte would ask me, why? Well, at first glance, the obvious answer is that Matthew is trying to show us exactly who Jesus is, where he comes from, and why we should believe he is the one we confess him to be. Which is great, until you take a closer look, and you start to notice some things about this list. The first thing I notice is those three groupings of 14 generations each. One would think, wow, that's amazing how perfectly that worked out. You know, in Hebrew thought, 7 is the perfect number, 7 days of creation. So 14 means doubly perfect. But a quick look at Ancestry.com, or really just a survey through the Old Testament, would show us that Matthew might have taken a few liberties in making this list work out just so perfectly. Every one of us has that genealogist in the family, right, who's making that family tree of each family. That genealogist is at Matthew's house, and they're saying, wait a second, that's not quite the record I have written down. But Matthew's more interested in the symbolic picture than the literal list. The other interesting thing about this genealogy is that there were women included. In those genealogies of the day, you'd really only expect to hear a list of the great men of the family. But here Matthew lists women. And not just any women, women that you really wouldn't expect. First, we hear about Tamar, who's a Canaanite. And we have to remember that Jesus' first audience was mostly Jewish Christians. So the fact that Matthew would even want to allude to this audience, that there were some Gentiles in the family tree, it's incredible. And then he lists Rahab, the prostitute. And then there was Ruth, and she was a Moabite, and there's no love for Moabites in Israel. And then we can't forget Bathsheba, although we sort of can forget her because she's not named in the list. Matthew only says David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. Ooh, that's awkward. I mean, everyone knows it, right? We just don't talk about it much. But Matthew does talk about it. And we certainly can't forget Mary, yet another outsider who comes out of nowhere with this, without any long genealogy giving her any sort of street cred. But all of these amazing women play key roles in Israel's story, and of course in the story of Jesus. We see embedded in all of these stories these important virtues that especially these women carry. They are women who demand justice. They are women who are courageous and loyal, and without them, the story of Jesus does not move forward. So suddenly, all those ancient family photos that are on the walls of Matthew's house start to make more and more sense. We start seeing the family resemblance in Jesus, the newborn child. Not because all of this history is pointing down to him, but because he is a reflection of all the family that's come before him. There's a deep relationship between the story of the Israelites and the story of Jesus. So then Matthew finally, after that long list, gets into that story of Jesus' birth. And even there, he has to connect it to the history of God's people. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. And then he quotes Isaiah. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. God is with us. I think we believe that, but it feels like there are times when it feels like God's with others and not with us. It feels like there's those times when God's with, the immediate family members, the ones who know all the inside jokes, the ones who know those not-to-be-spoken stories from the past, the ones whose picture shows up on the wall more times than not. The rest of us start feeling like outsiders then, and often like we don't belong. But Matthew again reminds us that the origin story of Jesus includes plenty of unexpected outsiders. Women, foreigners, sinners, all of whom are a part of God's story. In all of that, Matthew points us back to Father Abraham and God's promise to him that all the families of the earth will be blessed, and that the good news of the gospel is the fulfillment of this promise, that God's covenant love is for all of us. We didn't hear it read today because we ended the gospel, but his gospel is the only gospel to go on and mention yet another group of outsiders, the Magi, the wise men from the east. They were the astronomers, the scientists whose thought processes and ideas had no place in the culture of that day. And yet they were the ones who saw the work of God and came to worship the God who is with us. So when we go to Matthew's house, we know that God is with us, all of us. No insiders, no outsiders. No more hidden and embarrassing places in our family tree. We are no longer defined by the messiness that's in our families or in our lives. From now on, we are only defined by the one who writes our names into the branches of the family tree of Emmanuel, Jesus Christ, God with us. Amen.